Okay, so here's the problem we're trying to solve. You're using PHP and you need a way to debug the code flow. That's what we've got right here. And so to give you an example, I put a snippet in this file called 1PHP. The 1PHP file, one of the first things it does is it calls this controller PHP file. So I put a piece of code in this file, and this file, and this file, and so on. And by doing so, it reports back and builds a code flow chart. So we see that controller PHP was called by 1PHP. Cashback PHP was included from the controller PHP. This file was in fact included by cashback PHP. So we can see the flow chart visually. Now here on line 121 of the page URL switch right here, we're notating that we've got a couple of variables and these are the values of those variables in case we need to put those in check as part of the code flow. And then we come here, we find that build page URLs plugin save was included by the cashback PHP file, which is right here. So by this we can see that cashback PHP has included both this file and that file. And that actually is the case. I've looked at the code, it works perfectly. Now down below we have functions that were fired, and it's important to note that these are reported in order of their occurrence. So the next thing that happens is the function key plugin or shortcode name was fired, and it was fired from within the file build page URLs from plugin page. Now that makes sense because here is that file, which is not to be confused. They look very similar, but that's a different file. So from that file, that's what in fact executed this function. Now we have a function called kplugin or scode, which was fired from inside this file. Now the reason that was fired from inside this file is because that's where this function lives, and that's the function that called this function. So that's a little tricky, but that is in fact exactly how it went. This function was called, and then this function was called from it, and it gives you the line number if you want to track that down. So just to verify that, we're going to look at the key plugin or shortcode name, and we're going to look for line number 105. And at line 105 we do in fact make a call to kplugin or scode, just as the flowchart indicated, and then that function was in fact called from within that function. Now here on line 36 and again on 52, we pick up some variable values that are from the page build page URLs from plugin save, which is right here. So in addition to firing off these functions, it's assigned some variables, and then once again down here, again stemming from that same page, we fire another function off, and then from, and this you can tell, find shortcode on pages. So apparently from within that function, we in fact call another function here, and then finally from within the cm get shortcodes function, which we can see that correlation here, we call another function called cm shortcode from array. So you can see these file names would be real brain damage to pull together. Oh, and we do have a final here, which is we do get back to post build page URL switch, which is not to be concerned with the pre-build page URL, so a different file, and that is called from cashback PHP, which is right here. So cashback PHP here, you can tell that's the backbone of some things that are happening here, calls these various functions, some which call other functions, and eventually end up back at the that same file. So let's talk about how do we build that so that we get that visual. It starts off like this. We'll go to controller, because that's the first file we're using, and we type in we make the function call cmcodeflow record. We indicate that it's a file, and we say clear global. So we want to clear the global value that maintains this code flow. That ensures that it starts right here. And that single snippet results in this right here. It shows where the code starts, and it indicates where it was included from, and that's done programmatically using PHP's backtrace. So now let's look at the cashback PHP file. The cashback PHP file, we have the same function here. It just says codeflow record and file. We don't need to clear globals. That's only done when instantiating this process. And so that's how we know we are in cashback. And again, using PHP's built-in backtrace, we're able to detect what file called it. The next file, we on our file path are included files, because it tells us it was in fact included from the cashback file. Here is this pre-build page URLs, and that is this file right here. Again, we've notated that file should be kept track of. And then we have, let's talk about these variables that are showing up in the code flow, which are in that same pre-build page URL switch file. I'm going to just search for the same function call, and you'll see here we've made two function calls. We have indicated that we are in a file. That's what this does. Anytime there's a file, it means we have called the function from within a file. However, this last parameter is indicating the value of any vars. So if we want to record it in the code flow, we simply make our third parameter the variable and the variable's value as recorded at that time. And so at that point in the code, it lets us know what those values actually were. We already know how this works. We put that same function call and file at the top of the file, and it picks it up. Let's talk a little bit about functions. We are going to look at the key plugin or short code name function, which it tells us was fired from within the plugin save PHP file. So here we are at line 30 of build page URLs from plugin save, and you can see that function is actually called from there. Now we don't have any of our code. This code flow record is not listed at this line. It's listed inside this actual function. Let's take a look at that. So here's the file containing the function. Let's open that up, and we can see cmcodeflow record. Instead of file, we're passing along that it is in fact a function, and this is a PHP I guess it's a constant of some kind that will in fact pass the function data to our code. And here we use it again for this function, and this is the one that's actually picking it up. So once this is called, we record that it is in fact a function it's being called from, and using PHP's backtrace information we can determine where this function was actually called from. So it's important to note, on pages that are dedicated to having nothing but functions in them, as this one is, we don't want to put we don't need to put that a file was included here, because we're really interested in the code flow. If we're loading functions, that's not really a code flow item we're interested in. We're interested in when the actual function fires, and so we want to put that within the function, not within the file that loads a bunch of functions. And we can move down here. We see there's another variable made mention of here, and it records that value. I've already showed you what that looks like. Now let's talk about how you can make this uncomplicated. You can take things like this and insert them on every function in your code. You can, at the top of files that are not function-only files, you can insert something like this that has the word file as a parameter. Again, the functions are going to have the word function as the parameter, and variables will differ slightly because they will have the third parameter will indeed be the variable and value, as I showed earlier. Now let's take a look at the function that uses this code. So here is the code flow record. It picks up the location, i.e. function or file, any notes, if there are specific notes you want to pass along, and the only one we're using so far, I think, is the clear global. That should probably be clear globals. I think I'll go ahead and change that right now. I'll make that change. Yes. All right. And then the last thing is vars, which is some var equals some value. That's going to print out literally in the flow chart as you want it to appear. So if we here's something, there is a global called record code flow. If that is set to off, then we don't want these code flows running in the background if they're not actually being used. So we want to set a global somewhere for record code flow as being on or off. If it's on, we're going to get the data that we've just experienced. If it's off, none of that will happen. Let's go down the line here. Okay, here we detect if the location, which in the case of file, has a PHP extension, then we know it's a file, and otherwise we know it's a function. It's going to be one of those two things. And based on that, if it's a file, we pick up some backtrace information here, and we're able to formulate what the file was that included that file. And if it's any line information, let me see if there's a line information on it. No, there's no line information on that, but there is line information on this variable. So if you pass a variable along, it'll detect that, and then it will determine what line number that variable information was asked for at. All right, moving a little further down the line, we detect if we determined it was a function, we go ahead and once again pick up some debug backtrace information. We separate out of that the caller where that function was called from, and we place that information on its own line. Now all of these, this shows us the file that called it as well as the line that the function was called from. Now all of these have a class so that we can assign it a specific class, and let's talk about how that works and how we get the colors on the screen. And this is how it creates the file. The code flow is recorded in this globals variable over time, and that's just always there until the page gets finished loading. Then wherever you want it to be displayed, you insert a call to the code flow view, and let me give you an example of how that looks. So this is where we want that code flow view to be executed. We're going to create a file, and the way that we create that file is we pass it the global's name, the array name, which is always going to be code flow. We pass it the name of a file that we would like it to create, and we pass it the title that we want that flowchart to have. Now let's look at this code flow view function, which is right here. There's the globals array that we're passing it, which has been kept track of here. And the file name, if it's not supplied, is simply going to be called code flow, but we did supply one in this instance, and the headline we've also supplied in this particular instance. Now you can change this. We use a default file path here, which is where we want our code flowcharts to be stored. You can change that to whatever you want. This is the style that installs the CSS classes within that file. So we get the colors, the purple, the black, and so on that you saw. You can change these to anything that you want. And here we do a PHP put contents to that file path. That completes the process. And you can see here in our code debug code flow, we have an HTML file right here and right here by different names that we've created over time. And here is the, of course, the final example and how all that came together. I hope that helps, and I'll leave some code for you to download. These files will be available so that you can use it and maybe expand on it and improve it. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.